working with important issues. The people that you're going to hear from today have stories that you need to hear. The NAACP was formed in 1909, 109 years ago, and has been a freedom fighter for justice and inclusion for African Americans all across the United States of America. 5 years later, in 1914, the NAACP Portland, Oregon branch was formed. The Portland NAACP branch of the NAACP has been a voice of reckoning for the putrid, violent, blatant, and unapologetic actions of a racist society that imagined a totally white community, a community that severely whipped blacks that refused to leave by not less than 20 or more than 39 stripes to be repeated every 6 months until they were no more. It went further. In its relentless tirade of racism and classism, by ensuring that no blacks would never become stakeholders by writing in its Constitution that no free Negro or mulatto not residing in this state at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall ever come, reside, or be within this state, or hold any real estate, or make any contract. Well, in 1859, it was a done deal. Oregon entered the Union of the United States and did so as a white-only state. With well over 77% of Oregon's population being white, I think it's pretty safe to say that Oregon is the whitest state in the Union and is one of the whitest cities in America. Oregon has continued to hold true to its promise of exclusion of African Americans from being property owners and cardholders in the game. It is no secret that something went terribly wrong in the largely populated area of Vanport, Oregon, now called Delta Park, when flooded waters displaced an entire community. On the morning of Memorial Day, May 30th, 1948, the Housing Authority of Portland issued the following statement: "Remember, dikes are safe at present. You will be warned if necessary. You will have time to leave. Don't get excited." This non-exciting catastrophe drove the African-American community to northeast Portland, only later to become subjected to blighting. Blighted areas means that by reason of deterioration, faulty planning, inadequate or improper facility, deteriorous land use of the existence of unsafe structures or any combination of these three, or detrimental to the safety, health, or welfare of the community. This opened this community up to predatory lending principles that would cause them, or they thought, to protect their homes from the sensation of blighting and from being devalued. Well, that didn't work. It didn't work at all. We were blighted, and there was later 40 acres that were taken away from the African American community. Again, we were told not to worry, and that everything would be well, only to find the African American community once again displaced. Now we're going to fast forward to 2019. There is a threat to the finalization of gentrification and displacement of the African American community once again. When we look at what is happening in our city with the issues that surround us concerning this lien that would be placed on our properties, we are finding it very despairing. The NAACP was successful in 1922 to help facilitate the removal of this wasteful and shameful stain that encroaches our society even now. We stand now, and we didn't come alone. We came to stand in solidarity with our neighbors that make this Portland, that make the Portland that we envision for it to be today. An inclusive Portland, a strong Portland, a resilient Portland, a Portland that stands together hand in hand. We stand here with the Portland Assembly of Music Portland, Save Portland Buildings, Portland Tenants United, and many more. We will not allow the same tactics of our state. We will no longer allow the same principles that have driven us out again. We will no longer allow these things to remove us from our community. We want action. We demand action. We want it now. God bless you.
My name is MK Hansen. I'm a data activist, a forward and reverse systems architect and engineer, and a lifelong renter. I'm kind of an indoor kid. Understanding the complexities of how things work and how they're constructed, all the moving parts and interdependencies, is ultimately also a search for the truth. It's how we get to the heart of issues, confront the root of problems, and build solutions designed not only to make things better, stronger, or faster, but also to do no harm in the process. Bureaucracy is highly fragmented, incredibly inefficient at solving systemic problems, and reluctant to even admit that there is a problem, especially if it's a big one. Add politics and deep-pocketed corporate lobbyists to that, and you get intentional obfuscation of the truth that drives and influences policy through false narratives instead. The architects and engineers of disaster capitalism have their fingerprints all over our society, and they have shocked, lied, flattered, harmed, and hindered every step of the way in order to extract wealth through constructs which create and perpetuate poverty, pain, and suffering of the many for the profits of the few. So I'm here today to help us unpack a few things together. It'll be a fun and infuriating thing that we do together. For today, we're going to focus on one of the spokes in this wheel, this stealth URM title encumbrance. Even that's a mouthful. And it's a complex issue, but by showing up here today, I know you want to do this together. So thank you. This is part and parcel of the broader conversations about policies of displacement, demolition, and dispossession that many of you here today are already too familiar with. I am so inspired by the work that so many of you are doing. I see you, I respect you, and we're here with you too. So let's start unpacking. Some of you have copies in hand of the press release for this event. Hang on to this. It'll help you discern who is telling you what they want you to believe by omitting critical information from those who believe it's their ethical responsibility to give you all the information so that you can decide for yourself. The narrative you're probably familiar with is that the city passed an ordinance in October requiring owners of unreinforced masonry buildings to put up a sign, a notification, that lets tenants and visitors know that the building may not perform well in a major seismic event. Seems harmless enough. It's just a sign, like the ones that employers and public establishments are required to put up in conspicuous places, or like lead paint disclosures. 3 weeks ago, the BDS started sending out a variety of FAQs and links to the owners of buildings who were on the city's URM list. A list, by the way, that comes with a disclaimer that says it's unverified. A list that was assembled by drive-by. Embedded in these packets of information was a contract that owners needed to sign and file with the county tax assessor's office that explicitly authorizes the city to attach an encumbrance, a lien, to the title. So this sign is no longer a notification, it's a condemnation. It's an anvil dropped onto the mortgages of every building on the list in one fell swoop. buildings that are already otherwise in compliance with current building codes. And the conjured weight of that stealth maneuver is the full cost of the most prohibitively expensive and invasive level of retrofits, way beyond what the current code requires, and astronomically above and beyond the policy recommendations still being considered. Mayor Wheeler made a promise just a few months ago to work with community members to phase in financially viable incremental retrofits, which is especially critical for people like the ones I stand here with today, who only have one small building or church and without large diversified investment portfolios to leverage. This title encumbrance breaks that promise, but it risks the livelihoods, missions, and well-being of all the nonprofits, low-income renters, small businesses, artists and musicians, and congregations who live, work, and connect in these places. We don't need to look any farther than what's right in front of us for daily reminders that the speculative real estate investment gold rush is predicated on creating, exacerbating, and perpetuating a crisis of affordability. We have the second highest rate of unsheltered individuals in the nation and thousands of market rate apartments sitting vacant. The world's largest private equity corporation and Wall Street's biggest landlord, the creator of rent-backed mortgage securities, Blackstone, and their Washington state partner in gentrification, Holland Partner Group, together bought and sold over $2.5 billion in multifamily real estate in the Portland area just in the last 2 years. There are over 7,000 residential units alone in URM buildings, and together with all of these commercial buildings, they are the most supremely valuable locations. There is gold in the dirt underneath these cornerstones of our community, and the only way that speculative developers can extract it before this overinflated bubble bursts in a few years is to pull the alarm right now and offer no choice but all or nothing, one or the other. The city's title lien will damage and distress mortgages instantly and has already caused disinvestment by conventional lenders. It will provide opportunistic advantage to private equity and allow them to coerce small business owners, small building owners, into selling their prime pieces of real estate for artificially low cash prices because they have no leverage and their entire investment has been wiped out by the encumbrance. These are the constructs of hostile takeovers that Wall Street is known for, and we live in a city that lets developers demolish sound, habitable housing without any mandates of affordability. The city is planning to upzone 96% of residential neighborhoods through the Residential Infill Project and every major commercial corridor through the Better Housing by Design proposals, increasing the speculative value even more in all these coveted locations and for certain trophy buildings, and incentivizing the wholesale man-made destruction of the fabric of our communities. We're here today to stand with the NAACP in solidarity and to build a broader coalition of support in demanding that the city leaders stop. Bring those of us who are most significantly and adversely impacted by these policies to the table instead of stacking committees with those who stand to benefit the most financially at our expense. Come together. Thank you. Together in good faith to promote policies that reinforce the fabric of our communities instead of tearing them apart. We can have it both ways. Solutions built from the bottom up with full transparency and community engagement is how we balance retrofitting our built environment to be safer and more resilient for the future while protecting our citizens in the present from the man-made catastrophe of displacement, the economic violence of corporate gentrification, and the constructs of poverty and inequality. Thank you for listening.
What do we want? Justice! What do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! What do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! What do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! What do we want it? Now!
Hello, my name is Virginia Hankins, and I'm a small. Hello, my name is Virginia Hankins, and I'm a small business owner on Martin Luther King. And this lien will not only affect me, but it will also affect the business owners, the 3 small business owners that's in my building, their employees, their families, and community. The lien will cause a financial hardship for my family. I will not qualify for a $100,000 to $1 million loan. In the past, I've already had difficulty getting a loan, And the cost of the loan for the repairs, for the upgrades, will mean that I will be repurchasing my building again multiple times. Safety is important to everyone. We will not fail unless the city fails us. We're asking the city to please stop the process and engage everyone.
I am Mara McLaughlin, Executive Director of Music Portland, the local music industry association. Popular music in Portland is the audible spirit of our city. We're recognized internationally as a center of musical originality, innovation, and authenticity in multiple genres. Representing the 1,000 metro area music businesses, venues, and the massive community of performers and fans, Music Portland opposes the placarding lien applied to URMs, but supports fair and necessary safety upgrades to our local buildings. I'm here to speak about the social costs of this placarding ordinance. Modern life is increasingly isolating. Where do we gather? How do we create a connected community if we live our lives in isolation? Live performance is one of the last institutions that brings us together to expand our social networks and ultimately our civic engagement. Our city boasts more than 1,000 live music performances every month, and there's no other activity in the city that connects our people together as frequently or as broadly. Like secular churches or the Grange Halls of Oregon history, music venues are the places that bind our citizens together. People gather with others of similar tastes to create genre communities whom they see repeatedly at different shows and through which they build connections. In Portland, the live music culture is noted for intimate, independent venues spread across the city rather than large arena shows. Each one of these venues is uniquely authentic and decidedly local. Venues provide meaningful experiences for residents, visitors, and new transplants, connecting people in meaningful ways to the cultural heart of Portland. More than 36 places where live music is performed regularly, including the city-owned Keller, are impacted by this ordinance. These venues presented collectively more than 30% of the total live music activity in the city currently. So if you lose 1/3 of our live music activity in the city, that is a death knell. Places like Kelly's Olympian and McMenamin's White Eagle that have become strongholds of the long-harassed local hip-hop community are threatened. The Moon and Sixpence is the clubhouse for the Irish, old-time, and Cajun music communities. It's threatened. Dante's and the Crystal Ballroom and the Star Theater, featuring local and touring bands of every genre, are threatened. The Liquor Store and Holocene not only feature the talents of our growing electronic artist community, but also support nonprofits and causes by letting them host events within their spaces. The Laurelthirst Public House raised funds for more than 500 music fans to purchase a beloved venue to keep it safe from developers within the last year. What better demonstration of the importance of music and community could you ask for? We also include community centers on our list of music performance spaces at risk. The Norse Hall, Ethos, Linton Community Center, Los Prados Event Hall, and the recently revived Polaris Hall in North Portland are purpose-built to encourage social cohesion. Do they need to be made safe? Absolutely. But this ordinance does nothing to improve safety and everything to threaten their continued existence. The local music scene has evolved organically and creates enormous value for this city and its citizens. But for all its vibrancy, the creative economy is fragile. Without places to perform and fewer affordable places to live, the artists will move away. They already are. More musicians are being driven from the city means that many supporting businesses like studios and labels must leave or close. Music venues operate on thin margins, and since most don't own their buildings, they'll suffer this unnecessary placarding policy with higher costs, reduced business, or eviction. In the absence of the city requiring new developments to include cultural and performance spaces, as New York does, There is no realistic chance that these vital organs of our city's cultural body will ever be replaced. It is not hard to imagine a Portland where this rich cultural artistic heritage has been demolished, where character, identity, and soul has been replaced with identical boxes piping music designed to sell products instead of inspiring communities. It happened in San Francisco, it can happen here. We didn't build these cultural riches so they could be sold back to us at a markup.
Yes.
The music community demands that City Hall suspend this placarding ordinance and lien and return to the original process that was started to improve public safety while protecting our city identity and lifestyle. Music needs to have a seat at the table too. We need everyone who creates, supports, or loves music to stay attentive to this issue. We can save our city.
Yeah.
Can you believe this coalition?
Yes, we can.
Music Portland, Portland Tenants Alliance, building owners, the NAACP, we're here together for a reason. My name is Pippa. I'm a housing provider. I own 12 units. I live in one. I also run PAIR. It's a program for homeless young people. This isn't just a placarding ordinance. It's a lien. It's a non-negotiable redlining of our deeds. If it were simply a placarding ordinance, like they say, the city would placard all of their own buildings, right? The schools, their low-income housing. And so there would be, if it were simply a placarding ordinance, there would simply be signs and enforcement. There's not. This, like I said, is structured like a lien. There are implications to this. What it means is that building owners can't get refinancing to do the actual work. Ironic. It also means that these building owners aren't able to sell to anyone but guess who? Cash buyers. Oh. This is real. Just 2 days ago, some colleagues of mine, people that I know, were denied a refi because their building is on the URM list. This is real. That said, I know that they'll be able to navigate this. They are white and they are well connected. Oh. This ordinance, this lien, will disproportionately affect our brothers and sisters of color who own buildings. This is all right. That's all right. This is redlining, not of area, but of structure. I want to remind you, the city already has a seismic code. It's called 2485, and it is good, and it works. It allows current owners to actually do the work with their own funds. But under the guise of fear-based safety concerns, the city has taken the unnecessary step with this redlining lien and is in the process of running our historically, locally owned small buildings, our low-income housing, our music venues, our small business incubators, our cornerstones of our community out of business. What does this mean? Let's get real here. What does this mean for PAIR, my nonprofit? We have kids. We have homeless young people who have housing vouchers who already right now can't get housing. There is not enough housing. We are in a housing emergency. I need no threat to our current housing stock because not only do people depend on these buildings, but our new nonprofits who inhabit them also depend on these buildings. The very missions of our nonprofits who serve the houseless are at risk if we privilege this harmful lien ordinance over more real and immediate concerns, such as housing and food and shelter. The city is painting a false narrative, saying that this is about public awareness and signage because it is not. It is structured like a lien. It is a non-negotiable redlining of our deeds. It is a transfer of wealth. This is about the loss. It is a transfer of wealth. It is about the loss of our local neighbors and neighborhoods to big and out-of-state developers. Let me tell you a story. How did I find out about all of this? About 2 years ago, I got a call out of the blue. It was from a friend of someone who was on the URM committee, and they said, Pippa, this URM thing, it's coming down the line, and you can't do it. Why don't you sell me your building cheap? I didn't know what he was talking about. Now I do. I'll remind you, I live in my building. So this is not only my business that this man is threatening, this is my home. The sharks are circling. We demand that the city stop and overturn this ordinance so we can... Amen. It's circling. We demand that the city stop and overturn this ordinance so we can simply maintain our buildings, do the seismic work under the current code without threat from the city or developers who see gold under our property. I want to end with a quote by Jane Jacobs. This is not the rebuilding of cities. This is the sacking of cities.
Right.
I've told you the history, and I allowed my friends to tell you the dynamics. You've heard their stories. We can't let this happen again. We will not, we cannot, we must not tolerate it. It will be because of people like you who have stood with us today that have heard the clarion call that says that there is injustice hanging around. And with you bridged with our neighbors, it will never and can never have its right. You and I together can make a stand. We are the people that can do it. Yes. Aren't we? We are a strong Portland. We will not be drowned out again. We are a strong community. We will not be blighted out again. We are a resilient community that will stand beyond the placarding and the situational encroachment of our titles and our deeds. We can do this. We're calling on Mayor Wheeler and the Board of Commissioners to stop this process now. We're calling on Mayor Wheeler, and we're calling on all of the commissioners to reset the table and invite all that are necessary to have a voice in freedom. We can say together in the immortal words of our great and ferocious leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, we will always remain free in this society where we have a choice to stand together, and together we can lift our voices and say that we're free, and we're free at last, and we'll continue to be free and be free at last, and we can thank God Almighty that we're free and we're free at last. God bless you.
That's right.
Thank you for being with us today. We're so happy to have had you. Thank you so much. God bless you. write letters, call, tell them to stop this.